Welcome back to the Enterprising Podcast, where we help agents work smarter, not harder. Joining us today is Carmella Hampton, a real estate agent and investor from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome, Carmella. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing great. So, take a moment and just share with us about how you got into real estate and what drew you to the industry.
So I wish I had some kind of oh, I had this epiphany, kind of story.
Yeah.
But I feel like it kind of just happened. I was looking for a house when I came to Texas to
Okay.
purchase. And then as we were walking the houses, I was falling in love with every single house and trying to figure out how to make a decision. And then I realized not that my realtor wasn't doing anything, because we all know we do a lot
You
behind the
do a
scenes.
lot. Yeah.
But I was like, I can go look at houses and get paid for it. And then I can talk to people all day too. Why not? Right. Like, and I'm in the military at this point. So I'm like, this
Mhm.
would be a good side gig um for play money. So that's
Yeah.
pretty much how I got into it.
Yeah, I mean, you know my story. It's very similar. I was about to turn 40 and I go, "Oh, I just want a real estate license. I probably won't do anything with it. But I just want to have it." It was like a midlife crisis thing. So we all come into this in different approaches or different reasons, and it's always very interesting kind of where the universe brings us, which is
Right.
always very different than where we expect to go. Very quickly, you started to lean into the investing side and fix and flips. So, what was it about that that was so attractive to you?
Okay, this one's gonna be kind of typical answer. Your HGTV wow factor. Like
Hmm.
that's what caught me. That's what catches a lot of people. But I don't know. I decided I could have fun with this. I don't have
Right.
to stick to traditional selling houses, buying houses, being the representative. I can play with it,
Yeah.
and there's so many different options. So why not? So I just took a chance and I dug into it and then I became obsessed.
Yeah. So, talk to me about some of the things that you have learned along the way, other than the fact that HGTV lies to us. But what else have
Yes.
you learned about flipping? Um, that maybe passing off a little advice to someone else who's thinking about taking that same road.
So I would say it's always going to be scary, right? You're
Mhm.
always going to be scared to start. You're always going to be nervous to start, but that's the best time to do it. You do it scared.
Mhm.
And as long as you have like a calculated risk, you take the risk,
Yeah.
but you make sure the numbers are right and then you go for it. The hardest part, to be honest with you, is starting. That's the hardest part. It's not finding the deal. It's not during the flip. It's not selling it. It's getting started. Your first one, your first contract, I guess, getting into it.
So talk to me a little bit about the calculated risk, because at least for me, it feels terrifying. This idea of like, oh, I'm putting forth money, and what if it doesn't work? You know me, I'm the plan for the worst, hope for the best sort of approach. So talk to me a little bit about kind of how you mitigate risk when it comes to fix and flip.
So okay, so realistically, you can't mitigate all risk, right? There's
Right.
always going to be some kind of surprise. Um, but for me, because I'm the same way too, I like to have everything planned. I don't want to take that step. I don't want to take that
Yeah.
jump unless I know 100% I'm going to be safe. So it
Hmm.
was a big thing for me to just jump in it after reviewing numbers. But basically, that's the key is you find your purchase price, you do the numbers, figure out how much it's going to cost you. Don't forget you have two closing costs. People forget you have closing costs when you purchase it and closing costs when you sell it.
Hmm.
So don't forget about those. Don't forget about your holding costs. Don't forget about your utilities and whatnot that you have to pay for. Put some money for wiggle room also. Like I like
Yeah.
to add a good $10,000 wiggle room to my rehab budget just in case, because you just never know. And as long
Yeah.
as those numbers are solid and you still have at least, I like to come out of profit, or sorry, I would like to net about 20,000 for each flip. So
Okay.
if your number is at 20,000 and up, then it's more than likely safe.
Yeah.
But if it's less than that, you might have to be a little careful. I'm not an expert. Maybe the experts they're good with the 5 to 10,000 net in profit, but I get scared, so I stay
Mhm.
away from the smaller numbers.
Talk to me a little bit about the creativity that you get to impart on your fix and flips, because that actually seems like the most fun part or the most HGTV part of the whole thing. So, talk to me about how you leave your personal touches when it comes to fix and flip, but still making it something marketable on the other end.
Right. So, what's funny is, I used to always joke around and say my sister was blessed with all the creativity genes. Like, I was left with none of them. So how I got into this position, I don't know. God has God has a
Hmm.
way. But, for me, I like to leave it where, of course, I try not to get too personally involved and, like, decorate the way I want it. I try to keep it
Right.
very, mass in general, but I put a lot of heart into it as if I was gonna live there, and then I think that's kinda how I like, figure out what kinda style I want. I like the open concept, and that's big in today's market anyway. Nobody
Mhm.
wants to live in a small box. And
Right.
then you do your upgrades, your it doesn't even have to be granite, it could be quartz, and then sometimes you give it that, like, wood finish also. So that's pretty much my style. I'm kinda, like, more in, like, the farmhouse, modern, boho
Hmm.
type of, yeah, area. But I
Very
discover
cool.
new things every time.
So one of the other things that I kind of picked up very early on in our interview, you talked about coming into things scared, and we here at the Enterprising Agent focus a lot on, mindset, motivation, but also setting appropriate boundaries and making sure that we are taking care of ourselves. In the same way that we want to take care of our clients, or in your case, to take care of our projects. So,
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about something that you've already been very open with, and we discussed this earlier. Just, some of the mental health struggles that you had, especially as you were transitioning out of the military and going into real estate full time.
Yeah, so it was, I officially retired this year, but I got out last year. And, the first couple months of getting out of the military was pretty hard. You start
Hmm.
thinking, "Who am I?" "Who's Carmella?" Because you had the military to do. I was in for almost 11 years. They
Mm,
told me what to do, when to do it, how to do it, why you're doing it, and you didn't really, not that you didn't have to think, but it was one of those, like, they broke you down to build you back up the way that they
right.
needed you to be. So then when you come out into the civilian world, you're like, okay, well, I don't have to ask permission to do what I want to do, but what do I want to do? So
Right.
I was lost for a while, and then I had real estate in the background. I didn't really
Hmm.
do too much with it at this point. Then I started thinking, well, let me pick back up on it. But when I started picking back up on it, you start thinking and questioning yourself, am I doing
Yeah.
it right? Like, what am I really doing, who can I go to for help, who can I ask, and this, and a lot of boundary issues also, because
Hmm.
when you're in the industry, I mean, to be real, you have to have strong boundaries, or else people are just going to walk all over you, clients, other realtors, like, everybody in general, people in general. And so that was hard for me. I focused a lot on what other people thought of me.
Mm.
It took a really big toll. I had a lot of, just what do you call it? Self-doubt, I guess we can just categorize it as that. Um, but with therapy and going down this healing journey, you realize the stronger your boundaries are, the better your mental health is. And as long as you have people around you that can support you, and it doesn't have to be like 50 million people. It doesn't have to be all of social media because the haters are gonna hate, and if
Hmm.
you don't have any, you're doing it wrong. So
Exactly. People aren't paying attention to you if you don't have haters.
right. So really that, like, just, and then having a set schedule for myself. I realized, I started relying heavily on my bed and, like, sleeping all day and just not the best, not the healthiest. So I started getting up early in the morning, going to the gym, then taking the kids to school, doing some admin work in the beginning half of the day, and then what I call field work for the
Hmm.
later half of the day. So that's pretty much how I get through things.
So you mentioned, one of the things that took a toll on your mental health was talking or thinking too much or caring too much about what other people thought of you, and were you doing enough, and what would your client say if you set up a boundary and all of that. Do you feel that ha- working more on the investing side, that fix and flip, where it's like, this is my project and my project alone, and I am both
It's
agent
my
and
baby.
client, yeah, yeah, it kinda helps to get rid of that, "Well, what do other people think?" Well, it doesn't matter because there's no client to please. It doesn't matter because until you're putting it on the market and getting offers, there's no other agent to worry about. It's something that you can, um, amplify as much or as little as you want. Do you feel that's part of why investing is so attractive to you?
I think it has something to do with it. I mean, don't take me wrong. I love working with people regardless,
Mhm,
but I think on the investment side, it probably did help me build a backbone in a sense, because the investment side is so different than the residential. And especially if being a realtor, and then what if I'm dealing with an investor as my client?
mhm.
That's a whole other ball game, like we're not the greatest people sometimes.
Yeah.
We're just harder to work with a little bit, but then you have to have that switch.
Mhm,
So I think, yeah, in a sense, it taught me to have boundaries, to speak up for myself. And if my client is not doing something that I'm morally okay with, then
mhm.
I have the right to walk away. I mean,
Yeah.
I can fire a client. It's not unheard of. But yeah, I think it plays a toll in it for sure.
Talk to me about how you surround yourself with those people who do support you. How did you narrow down what that truly looks like for you, and almost what is that vetting process, or what is that gut instinct when it comes to who you surround yourself with?
That's such a good question because when I first started getting started, or when I first got started, sorry,
Mhm,
even nowadays, you try to find familiarities with other
mhm,
people, other agents, other clients, other investors, and well, me, I tend to
mhm,
attach myself, right? Really quick, just because, okay, you're similar, you're doing what I want to do, and I want to learn from you type deal. And not to mention, I would like a mentor during this
mhm,
whole thing. So you try to find one and you find people. And I realized that was not the right approach in a sense, because you run into people who don't have your best interest at heart.
right.
And it doesn't matter if you have a good heart, that doesn't always reciprocate to the other
Mhm,
person. So what I started doing and how I started surrounding myself with people who genuinely care about what I'm doing and want to help, and cheer me on. I started having like coffee lunches,
mm,
like small intimate things where I can start the vetting process in a sense. And then you just find out it's energy. I'm all about energy. If you have bad energy, I can feel it from a mile away, and I'm
mhm.
probably not gonna attach myself. But also, I am also a walking contradiction too, because I'm really weird, and sometimes I don't want to be out there.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's fair. We don't always wanna have to be on,
yeah,
and that's one of the things that, boundaries that I've had to set up is, there is trainer stuff and coach stuff and MC stuff and these things where I'm very public facing, and then, like, my batteries just start
right.
to
It
go
becomes
lower and lower, and I'm like, "I'm tapped out. I need to
yeah,
I need to recharge," and you can
yeah.
be both at different times. I don't think anybody is always 100% one
Mhm,
thing or 100% the other thing. So,
mhm.
I think that's an astute observation. I guess the last question that I have for you, talk to me about, because we're right now we're kind of getting close to a new year, and I've been very much about like reflection and looking back to look forward. So you've been in the business for 2 years, and before we started you talked about, like, I still feel very, very new. I'm definitely not that veteran agent that have this long book of business, and I'm like, girl, most folks at this point have already tapped out. They're like, real estate, what? I don't know her. So you definitely have that perspective. So if you could go back in time, and think about almost like day one, just past your test, Carmela, what sort of advice would you give to yourself that maybe some of our truly new agents might be able to grab a nugget from?
I think I would I would get outside of my head. I would do
Mm,
the most that I could to get outside of my head because usually, you're your own biggest critic.
yeah.
And so in the beginning, you're shy, you don't wanna go out there, you don't wanna talk to people, what if they think I'm weird? But I would just tell myself, who cares? Who cares? At the end of the day, seriously, who cares? What's gonna happen? They're gonna maybe look at you funny and say, "No, I'm not interested," or I don't wanna buy a house. Then what? You move on to the
Yeah.
next weirdo.
Yeah.
But I think that's what
People
I would
already look
do.
at me funny, so what's one more?
Yeah, exactly, like, I don't care, like, anyway, but yeah, I think I would give myself that advice, just who cares? Just do
Yeah,
it anyway. Do it
I love
anyway.
it. Well, if people wanna connect with you, where can they find you?
Oh, Facebook, definitely Facebook, so just my name, Carmella Hampton, and then send me a message, follow me, I'll follow back, and whatever the case is, let's be social media friends.
Love it, and I'll make sure I put a link down to your Facebook page in the show notes. Well, Carmela, I really wanna appreciate you joining us today on The Enterprising Agent. It's been fantastic to get to know you a little bit more and talk about your approach to real estate.
Thank you so much for having me, Steph.
It's been a pleasure.